Hello and welcome to the Ken McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
What's happening, everybody?
And for those 15 people that have already hit the like button, awesome job. And everyone else, hit it please as well.
Look at you right out of the gate. She's bossy.
I've had a rough morning.
Why?
Well, because I was running a little bit late from the gym. And I thought I had plenty of time to run. I went to the grocery store after the gym, and I thought I had plenty of time to run home, feed the dog, make myself breakfast, and run here and be on the live. And I did not have any time, and I lost my keys right before I left. So then that added some stress. And so then I was speeding, and I did not get pulled over, but I had a cop following me, so I was super nervous. And I got here about 2 minutes till.
Now you guys know how I feel. Tell me more.
Oh, so anyways, my heart's racing, but I'm here.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're here.
We had a fun weekend. You were in a golf tournament.
Yeah, I played golf. I did not play well. Arizona Country Club. It was a lot of fun. Great tournament. Great guys. Great. Well run. It was a lot of fun. It's a good time. I hadn't played golf in a while since still a lie. So that was fun. And then I worked a little yesterday, which is fun. I'm going to Nashville this week with my YPO group. So
I know you're going to have an awesome time.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yep.
So this is a good topic you've got today. I can't wait to jump in.
Yeah, we're going to jump in. Not
I've
yet.
I've seen this stuff before.
But we are going to jump in.
All right.
First, we're going to go over your Twitter question of the week.
All right.
You asked, how do you think the current real estate market challenges compared to the 2008 crisis? Which is a very good question. Jerry says, things are taking more time to play out. Time will tell.
Well, that's for sure. Mm-hmm. The one thing that's consistent are the banks. So, the banks are pulling back hard. So underwriting's harder. That definitely happened. One of the big things that's different is that on the residential side, we're not seeing the number of defaults, of course.
We're not, but I am starting to see a lot of homes piling up in Scottsdale.
Yeah,
when I say piling up, I don't mean, a ton, but like compared to what it was even a couple months ago, it's definitely starting to get more stagnant.
Listings are definitely up.
Mm-hmm.
You guys know I like to do those lag videos, where you drop a pebble and you see the rings as they come out. I'm impatient, just like all of you. I want things to happen quicker, but there is a lag.
Yeah.
When the Fed increases rates, if you Google how long does it take for those interest rates to affect the economy, in most cases you're going to see 18 to 24 months. Mm-hmm. So, so I've seen some that say 6, but, you're looking at a year plus for that lag effect to kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, these rates, they're in the 8s, that's high.
I know. And construction debt's even higher. We had a hard money, the Capital Fund guys on, remember, I think that podcast is coming out this week. So don't forget to see that on Wednesday. That's an interesting one because hard money is typically, which is basically short-term money. It's typically priced higher, as you would imagine, than long-term. So short-term is higher than long-term because it's riskier. But that's an interesting podcast because as rates go up, so does hard money.
Yeah.
So,
absolutely.
And then, of course, things get further and further out of reach for people.
Yep. And Jerry, pull up the next one. Craig said the run-up felt eerily similar. It feels like this will play out differently. The upper bracket is starting to deal on price, but no inventory and lower price points.
Yeah, affordability. That's the affordability is moving. So, of course, that's why you're not finding the deals on the entry levels. That's why Danille, look at her. She's smart because she started going after those entry-level homes in Scottsdale. The time she started, they were in the 400s.
Then some of them were in the 200s.
Well, yeah, the 200s. Then they went to the 400s, 300s, 400s. But now you can't find any under 6.
Yeah, like if you find one in the 5s, you're lucky. You know.
So affordability is a problem. I'm sure people are seeing that everywhere, but it seems like the million plus stuff, which isn't that crazy that we're talking about $1 million homes?
Well, me and my friend Jess were talking about that. Where because her house she lives in is over $1 million, and it's a standard. It's nice. It's like a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home. And she goes, Danille, when I was younger, I was like, I'm like living in $1 million home. We're from the Midwest. It would be just like this amazing, huge thing. And she's like, it's wild that my home that I live in is over $1 million.
Well, I remember that used to just be like California and New York.
Yeah.
Right. And now it's nuts. It seems like the $1 million home is kind of I know I think the average prices are still in the mid 4s, I think, but million is nuts.
Yeah. Miner says, it can't hold. I haven't had these rates since 71. And when we had them in 71, the price points were a lot lower. So
yeah. And remember what's going on there. Massive inflation. 70s.
Yep. And then the third one is from Johnny, and he says supply. This is more like the 1970s.
Yeah. So there's another one.
Yep.
Yeah. They're right. It's an interesting time. We're definitely and also for me, it's interesting when I come do this channel because most people are playing around on this channel. A lot of people, They look at real estate as single family, which is a sandbox that I'm not really in.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm seeing, massive declines in value on the commercial side. So we're dealing with the lenders that are, I'm going to do a video this Friday on what would be called rescue capital, and take a look at the capital stack and, this preferred equity. Now, if you don't understand what those are, just watch on Friday because the new money's coming in, guys. The rescue money's coming in. There's sharks swimming right now looking for deals to snap them up so they don't actually go to market.
On the commercial side.
Right. Yeah. And also on like Airbnbs and stuff like that too, there's a lot of money out there looking for deals.
Yeah.
And but the target is definitely not on residential. Most of those people, I think Jason said, I don't know how I have to verify this, but he said that 80% of the folks out there have mortgages under 4%.
Right.
So that leaves a small percentage of people. And if you have a 4% mortgage, you're not going anywhere.
Right. Unless there's a bad recession and maybe you lose your job. That's the only caveat.
Because then you scoop that money for living. But it's nice. I'm glad people have equity and I'm glad they have those low mortgages. Those mortgages are now closer to what some of the rents are. Mm-hmm. So
or less.
Yeah, there's no way that people are going to double their cost of their mortgage because the houses are more and the interest rates are more.
Yeah. Well, you just wrote that article for Jet Set. There's no way people are going to, even to buy something of equal value, they're basically doubling their rent payment mortgage payment at this point. And so when most people sell, they're upgrading.
That's right. Yeah. So the Jet Set magazine is a magazine I've been writing for 5, 6, 7 years, I guess. It's in all the FBOs and it's fun, and that's what this article's out next.
All right. And before we jump into our topic, I wanted to mention we have a happy hour tonight. If Jerry could pull it up with Clay Akawinzi. It is going to be on, banking and all of that stuff.
This guy is smart. If you didn't see him, he spoke at our Limitless conference. One of his teachers at Berkeley, I think, was Janet Yellen, of all people. So I'm going to give him some crap about that. But he's really, really, really smart, studies markets, interest rates. He's right now focusing on multifamily, but really, he's with a company and, that's in every space. So it's going to be excellent to see. Yes, the people he has access to, the information he has access to will be mind-blowing. So this will be a good one.
Yep. And then those are for our members. So just go to kenmcelroy.com/join now if you want to join. We do a couple of happy hours a month. And then the other thing that is free is I'm going to be sitting down with our acquisition associate, Alina, and we are going to be going over, how MC underwrites a deal,
Alina?
what we're looking for.
Gosh.
So this is free. So just go to kenmacro.com/webinar. It is this Wednesday at 11 a.m. Arizona time. And it's going to be very beneficial for those of you looking to understand what to look for either in an apartment or even a house. Either one, just kind of things that MC looks for and how they look at a deal and make a decision, yes or no.
That's going to be a good guess for you. By the way, guys, Alina is on a call with me every week, and she's the one who does all the underwriting on our deals. So she's our senior analyst. So she's going to give you some tips, some secrets.
And she's a character, so it'll be fun, right?
She knows her stuff.
Yeah. All right. So before we jump in the topic, slam that like button. We love that. And let's get started. So today we're going to be talking about Zillow's 1% mortgage. So is this real or is it a scam? So to go over, for those of you that don't know, Zillow's advertising that they have a 1% mortgage where you can put 1% down and get a loan.
That's why it's not a mortgage. I was like, this is such a big marketing play, and you guys got to watch this stuff now, when these lenders are getting smart, home builders, it's 1% equity, bought down with leveraging all their partners. That's essentially what this is.
Kind of. I mean, there's a lot to go over here.
I know.
So to start, it's not Zillow's program. So, Zillow is promoting it for the lending company.
Oh,
but it is
that's a surprise.
Zillow's program, right? Many lenders have this. I was talking to Matt, who, we like to use for lending. He's very familiar with this. And it's very hard to qualify for. So I want to kind of go over some of this stuff for those of you looking at it.
It's for affordability too. Yeah, that's true. That is a component.
It is, but it's still, you'll see. So you do get, so basically what they're doing is you still need 3% for a loan, right? So they're basically giving you 2% in credits for the down payment so that you have the 97% loan to value. Now, this means, because they're doing that for you, that they're going to charge a higher rate and more closing costs in order to.
So let's just sum before you jump past this. I think you guys all need to understand what's happening here. They're giving you 2% down, but they're charging it to you as well. So you're paying for it, but they're just upfronting it, but then they get paid back. That's actually how this works.
Correct. So they're giving it to you, but you're going to pay more in the long run to have it. It won't be that long of a run.
It's a good way to get into a place if you can afford it. So there's nothing wrong with that. Let's don't take away the win. Let's don't take away the win. But it's 1% down.
Right. So the second stipulation that you're going to love is that if you make more than 80% of the median income in your area, you cannot qualify for it.
Right. So this is a number. We do a lot of stuff like this. In fact, there was a deal that we, as you guys know, we are in this is an affordable housing type program. There's tax credits and there's all kinds of things that you can get for different projects, different home building, all that kind of stuff. And there's an 80%. That 80% is pretty common. So, and it's important to understand that the median income is very different from place to place. Very. So what might be median in LA might be different median in Phoenix, might be different in Portland, might be different in Boise. So, but it's still 80% of the median. This is all public information. Still a good program, but again, I think, these are folks that can't afford the higher fees on the back end.
Well, there are also people that can't afford the mortgages, right? So
that's what I mean.
Yeah, so I pulled the median income, in Phoenix is $31,000. So that means if you live in Phoenix, 80% of that is $24,000. So if you make $24,000 a year, you can qualify for their 1% down.
Yeah.
But $24,000 a year is never going to qualify for a home in this market if you only have 1% down.
Yeah, 1% down means really it's 97% mortgage, right? So 3%, 2% lender, 1% you, 2%'s baked in, so you're still paying for it. So let's just say it's a 97% mortgage and the house is $200,000. Okay, so 3% of 200 is 6,000. So, so you're gonna you're still gonna pay 194,000 at the current interest rate, which is also baked in. So also one of the things I want to point out, when you've got your, let's just say there's people with money, and then underneath them are brokers, and then there's you. So the brokers don't have the money. They go out to find the people with money. That's what they do. That's why they call them a broker. I call them they work for tips. And there are all kinds of things. They do this in the auto business too. So think about it this way. I might the broker might get a loan from somebody for 8%. They might sell it to you for 8.25%.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that quarter point, while it doesn't seem like a lot, by the way, you pay for that. It pays for everything. So a quarter point. So there's brokering of the loans, is my point, and there's markups too. So you should not assume that there's back end fees. It's the same way that the wealth management works, and when you buy and sell mutual funds and that kind of stuff. There's loads in these things that you guys need to be aware of.
Yeah, and it's basically what they're doing is they're doing a bait and switch, right? Because, we're going to get into this last point here, but you're not going to qualify for the loan or the product. And they say, oh, you don't qualify for that, but we have these other loans and products that you can qualify for. So it's basically like a big marketing ploy to get people interested, to get people's names and information and emails, that they can then sell you a loan that you would qualify for potentially and go through them versus, a different
I'm pretty
brokerage.
sure $24,000 a year is about the minimum wage. It's pretty darn close.
Yeah, I don't even think it is. It's close. Yeah.
That's why I'm saying, I mean, whew.
Well, yeah. And then here's a third stipulation, which is like the all-around kicker, right? Even if you somehow qualify, they're only going to give you $4,000 like it was a $200,000 home. So the limit is a $200,000 home that you're buying.
Oh, there you go.
And so that 2% is only going to be $4,000. So basically, you have to find a home less than $200,000, and you have to make 80% of the median income in your county. And at least in Phoenix, that's not doable. Like maybe some places in the Midwest, you might be able to do that. But I don't even know if they've rolled it out in the Midwest because they launched it in Phoenix where it's very hard to find that. So, we are curious. Like if you've used this, please comment. Or if you have qualified for this, it would be an interesting, story to hear how it all worked. Or if you applied and you got bait and switched, comment below as well.
We need a scam button. Sherry, can we get a scam button? I was going to hit the scam button.
Oh, yeah. So.
Yeah, we need one.
Yeah, it's just, and Mike said it sounds like a shell game. And it really is. It's just a marketing game, right? Because
it's a way to get people in the door. Well,
yeah.
The mortgage lending business is, you can imagine, in big trouble, right? Like, just look around. I've seen this before. They staff it up with all these processors, and they have all these folks, and there's been massive layoffs, and there's a big discount, a big decline in sales, and which also means decline in mortgages. So the title industry is down, the mortgage industry is down, obviously the residential sales is down.
Well, somebody brought up, Zillow bought a bunch of like single family homes, and they're obviously losing money there. I'm sure they're losing money through advertisers because agents and all their revenues down. And, Zillow is invested in the mortgage loan business. They have a mortgage loan company. So they're trying to get business to their mortgage loan company. And that's basically all that this is. But they've made quite a buzz in their defense. We're talking about it. A lot of people are talking about it. So it's definitely, a good marketing play, I guess you could say, but it's definitely a scam.
Yeah, this is, I don't know. It feels like Twitter.
Twitter?
Never mind.
Please explain that.
No, I'm not going to. I'm just saying that there's a lot of arrows you could shoot at Zillow. You start off just being an informational database, and then they started getting in everybody's space.
Right.
And that's all.
Well, now, they'll approve, I list my homes on Zillow, my rentals, and they'll want to approve tenants and have them do applications through Zillow so you don't have to handle it. And I haven't done that because I don't like that, because I don't know how they're running things and how they're checking credit and how they're doing everything. So I still keep it in-house. But, I don't know if any of you guys use Zillow to run credit checks and background checks on your tenants, because they basically just approve them or unapprove them. And I don't know what they're approving them based on. If it's the same guidelines that I use. So I just choose to not do that. But they're trying to kind of get all over the place in this space.
Well, let's put it this way. If they run it, there's a fee. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, nobody, this is not philanthropy. That every piece of this is to snag a client and run them through a system and get them in debt.
Yeah.
That's actually the whole, let's be clear on that.
Right.
I don't know. I just, it wouldn't feel right if, somebody's making $24,000 a year and you're putting them in debt like that. Just doesn't feel right.
Right. But we're going to hop into our questions. But before we do, hit that like button. Check out the free webinar with Alina on Wednesday. She is our senior acquisitions associate. She's great. She's going to show you how to, what MC looks for in apartment deals and what you can be looking for in apartment deals or housing deals yourself. And we're going to jump into both the residential side of this and also the apartment side of this. I think this could be really good for those of you looking to become investors or already are investors or looking to invest with somebody else.
I'm going to watch that one.
Are you?
Yeah, I will. Why wouldn't I? I want to see what you guys are. I want to see what Alina says when,
11 a.m. Wednesday. Ken will be joining us apparently. So
as a
viewer,
can you set me up with the incognito? Yeah, Jerry. I'm gonna throw a lot of questions at you guys.
Oh my gosh. But anyways, let's jump into our inner circle. This is our monthly paid membership where we host happy hours. You can ask Ken questions. We have a great community. And Chad's question is a really good one. It says, during a tenant turnover, what is the average percentage of annual cash flow that it takes to get a home ready for the next tenant? For example, I'm cashing $3,600 annually and I need to turn it over for the next tenant and it costs me $3,200. This is basically most of my cash flow. And this is after the security deposit. What can be done to lower the cost to get the property ready?
It's a great question. First of all, I don't think using a percentage is a good rule of thumb, though I do love, the metric. And let me explain why. What happens is, like when Danille buys a home, let's say for rent, she goes in and completely renovates it. She puts in, the hardwood-looking floors. She puts in the new appliances. She paints it. She puts in new hardware. Basically, maintenance the thing completely. Okay, so now she has a baseline of turnover costs. Now, if she didn't do that, she might have carpet in there. She might have old appliances. She might have an old, whatever, all kinds of older things. You're going to have much higher maintenance costs when they move out. So you have to take a look at the original condition of the property before it was rented. Number one, and that's going to determine the move out expenses, I guess is a good way to say it. So that's number one. The other big variable is the tenant itself. So I have so many stories. I can't even go into them. But we've had I had one I have one apartment where the couple had a Shetland pony. They obviously weren't supposed to have a Shetland pony, but they had a pony in the place. Okay. Well, I'm just going to throw this out there. The damage was a little bit more than I thought. I've had ones that were bad smokers. You had this. The lady was a massive smoker, so we had to really put kills on the walls. And we have tenants that have rogue pets, have rogue roommates, have parties, the young ones, especially in their universities. So to answer your question with the percentage, it's really, really hard because it just literally depends on the tenants. And now, I've also had ones where, I've had people in there for longer periods, too. So if somebody's in there 1 year, it's different than somebody who's in there 5, 6 to 10. And we have people well over 10 in some of ours. So to answer your question, it's a little bit loaded. And so that would tell me that you had maybe some carpet in there. $3,600 is a lot for a turn. We don't spend near that.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, Chad. And you're going to have to write us back in under the question form to get more information. Because if you're spending $3,200 on a turn, and this is after you've deducted everything from the security deposit. I mean, my turns are probably
less than $1,000, maybe
less
$500.
than $500. Like that, usually I have to absorb. That's not security deductible. Wear and tear and those kind of things. But I mean,
you're in the Shetland pony category.
You're in the Shetland
sure.
pony. You're either not charging tenants for things you need to be charging them for.
My guys are cracking up over here, by the way.
You're either not charging them for what you should be charging them for, or you're over improving the unit or something, because you really like the cleaning fees on them, the handyman fee to patch all the holes and everything in the wall is on them. Like everything's really on them. The only thing that's not on them is just minor wear and tear stuff that does cost money, but like Ken said, maybe like $300 to $500. I mean, if it's small,
I'm gonna say 500 is about right.
Yeah,
on a turn.
Yeah,
it
you
should not be
paying
more than that.
Yeah, you really have to look at
that's
it.
That's a deep clean and touch up paint and maybe some little bit.
But
of
even the
maintenance.
deep clean, like the client's paying for the deep clean. Like you should be charging the cleaning fee that it's going to cost you to do the deep clean.
Right. So yeah, a lot of it's going to depend on and you said it casually, but I want to make this point. You can over improve a unit and rent it. You don't need to. You want to make sure there's nothing to do with the floors, and the maintenance stuff should be super minor. And you don't have to buy all new appliances, but you can buy. We just bought a beautiful stainless used refrigerator because one that we bought 2 years ago went out, and the thing wasn't very expensive, and So there are ways to mitigate these costs.
Yeah, I mean, the most damage I ever had a tenant do to a unit was like, I think it was $1,500. This was before the inflation, but it's $1,500. But I charge. It smells like smoke. I'm charging you to run the ozone machine. It smells like cat pee. I'm charging you to run the ozone machine. You had cat pee on the floor and I have to get the carpets deep cleaned, that gets charged to you too. I mean, everything needs to be charged to the tenant, and that's why it's important that you get enough of a security deposit to be able to do that.
Smokers and pet damage are two of the biggest.
But I will tell you, I had one unit, our handyman we normally worked at, he wasn't available. And so I threw in some handyman I had never worked with before, and he charged me, remember this, $1,500 to clean up the unit, which was way too expensive.
This is a good point. You might be getting killed with the turnover costs that you're paying.
And it was way too expensive, and he charged me for him and his 12 or 13-year-old son as two people.
I remember we went over there, remember?
Yeah, and
By the way, Danille had me go to Home Depot, guys, to pick up a toilet.
Because I did not want to pay any more for.
This is what happens. So she's like, "Hey, can you go by Home Depot?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. For what? A toilet." So then I bring the toilet over, and anyway, Danille. So we bought the toilet for one of her rentals, and this is how I spend my weekends apparently. and then the guy installed it, and they killed her on the installation costs.
Well, it was that, and he did a few other things,
Yeah.
but it was $1,500, and it shouldn't have been. I work with enough handyman. I know it should have been about $700 and some dollars. And anyways,
the first and last time.
So
I do
you could be getting gouged on your handyman, right? Like, so you need to find a good handyman that's charging you a fair price, that's doing fair work, and you really and. Like for this guy, it was double what I thought it should be because he charged me for him and his son as two people. And I'm sorry, but his son was not a whole extra person. He was helping him, you know.
And I'll give you some perspective. We've had several handymen at our home because we're doing all kinds of stuff all the time. We basically have somebody there every week. It feels like. We had one guy. It took him like 4 days to paint a room. We have another guy that takes one. So almost same per hour, but 3 or 4 times as long. And so this is a big topic, how to manage your handyman. So we've obviously figured that out. Now we got this guy he's money.
Yep. You just need to find somebody that's really good. Like he literally sets the timer when he starts, and then he stops it for lunch, and he sets it again when he's starting to work again. And you just have to find someone that you really trust, that they're being efficient and they're charging you a fair price.
So that sounds kind of high, Chad, but appreciate the question. We apologize for the tangent.
No, I think he liked
Shetland
it.
pony tangent.
Oh, here. Soleil has a question. They're asking, what's your expectation for the interest rate in 2024? I'm hearing 4 to 5%, and they're going to start cutting in April.
That's not what I'm hearing at all. I love the question. So, first of all, what are we at?
We're at
let's just say
almost
8. Should we just say 8? We got to pick something.
Well,
we'll
the
just
Fed
say.
fund.
Well, the Fed funds, 5.25, but the spreads are a little bit. So, but I don't think you're going to get a home loan for what are you going to get?
I think it's about high 7s, low 8s.
So let's just call it 8. So for it to get to 4 or 5, they're going to lower these at 1.25 point, right? So that would take 1/4 point would take 4%, 4 times it would be 16 lowerings. 0.5 point would be 8. So I don't see them lowering 8 times at 0.5 point to April of next year at all, or even starting April of next year. So to get down to those low numbers, you gotta, you have to think about the first thing they're going to do is pause, which they just did, which is good. But there's talk about them. If you look at the dot plot, there's talk about them actually going up again. So inflation is not under control. It's not in control at all. The Fed's losing the battle all over the place. Food's up, energy's up, shelter's up. I know they're down from what they were, but they're still up. They're still concerned about up. And unemployment's still low. So wages, according to them, are. I think the Fed wants the somewhere around 4%, right? 4.2%, I think, is where they believe stable unemployment is. So all of those things are still out of whack. So I'm not hearing. I haven't heard one. Mortgage people. Mortgage people and realtors.
Yeah, that's
it. They do.
Yeah.
But I just, and by the way, guys, I want low rates. I'm in the business to buy, of course, but looking at it practically, I think that's why I say stay alive to 25. I think maybe we get some relief. Maybe we're at 6 in the 6s. That would be awesome, but we're still way above where we were.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're enjoying the content, make sure you slam that like button. Let's try to get over 125. Mark from the Inner Circle. Oh, wait, really quickly, before we jump to that, Corey made a good point on YouTube. He said, if Zillow is so desperate for mortgage deals, doesn't that say something about where we're at in the housing cycle?
You got that right. Mm-hmm. I'm really glad you brought that up, guys. This should tell you something. They're scrambling. This is a marketing campaign. They're just trying to generate revenue to avoid layoffs.
Yep. Absolutely. So Mark from the Inner Circle is asking, do you think the ability for people to rent their homes on Airbnb and also long-term will affect them selling if we do hit a recession?
100%.
Yeah.
Right. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I'm already starting to see that. I was on a Facebook group this morning, just a general Scottsdale one, and an ophthalmologist, it was a woman who, is an eye doctor. She was renting 2 rooms in her home. So, that kind of hit me interesting because that's normally not the demographic you see renting out rooms. And typically when people rent out rooms in their home, it's typically because they need the money. Not usually because they just want to live with someone.
Very interesting. Huh. Yeah, it's interesting times, guys. Like I just think now, of course, we did an Airbnb show, which was with Pat Tice, I think it was. That was a good show. If you guys haven't heard that, he talked about what's actually going on with Airbnb. So there, if you look at the inventory increase, what was it, 50-75% the last few years?
Yeah, big increase. Yep.
So the demand for Airbnb, believe it or not, pre-pandemic, has changed a little bit, but really the supply of Airbnbs is the real problem. So
there's just too many.
There's been a supply. There's a supply issue. It's oversupplied. So just like anything, you get a lot of rentals in an area, the rent rates are going down. You get a lot of homes in an area, the cost to buy is going to go down. That's how this works. The same thing with Airbnb. So it's an oversupply problem. So once you read or take a look at that podcast on the Airbnb. That was a good one.
Yep. Yeah, and it's the Real Estate Strategies with Ken McElroy podcast. Brandon from the Inner Circle has a great question. He said, we're looking to find our first potential deal in Houston, and we've been working to verify all of our numbers. We don't know anyone that is currently investing in small multifamily in the Houston area. So he's asking if we know anyone in the Houston area. So if you are in the Houston area, feel free to comment below to help Brandon out. But I do know that you invest in Houston at MC Companies.
Yeah. So Brandon, that's a great question. So here's the thing that investors invest in property. So I think that what you really need, it's really kind of fruitless at this point. There's nothing wrong with putting, feelers out, but there's nothing to discuss. Like if you came to me and said, I'm looking at the Houston area, I would go, okay, well, bring me a deal. I'll take a look at it at some point. So, investors invest in actual deals, something that they could actually look at, something they could understand. There's so much that goes into this, obviously, as you go find something. So you got to find the deal first, make sure it's good, and then honestly, it's not that hard to find if you're out there, especially on LinkedIn, and Facebook has some really good investor groups out there. Forums like this are great. Obviously, being on the Ken McElroy forum, we have thousands of people that are investors. So there's a lot of really good resources. The investor piece is the easiest piece. Unless it's a bad deal, then it's really hard. So if it's a good deal, my experience has been that it gets filled very quickly. So I have a saying, the bigger the deal, or the bigger the brochure, the worse the deal. So if you're having some big sales job on trying to, sell somebody on why it's a good deal, then it's probably not that great of a deal. Typically, good real estate deals are super easy to figure out. Cash flow, value adds, way to get your money back out. Those are all kind of the fundamentals. So go find yourself a good deal. There's plenty of people, thousands and thousands and thousands of people. And there's so many. I just spoke last weekend, 2 weekends ago in LA, 600 doctors at some conference, great conference, real estate conference. And every single one of those doctors is looking for this kind of a deal. So these folks are everywhere.
Absolutely. Our next question comes from Gerald. He's asking, I have a domestic violence situation in my rental. The police show up at least once a week. This is causing me distress and the neighbors. Is there anything I can do about it? I actually don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's a property management question. I think that this is one of those deals where you got to take this to your a local attorney that deals in landlord-tenant law in your area.
Okay.
And get an opinion. It's, you know, it's. I'm first of all, I'm sorry for the situation. That's got to be horrible, not for you, but for the persons that's in it. I mean, obviously for you as well, but it's a touchy one, but there are things obviously in all leases and all clauses that. But I would take this to an attorney, get an opinion there. That's what I would do.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to kind of see what's in the lease, and
Yep.
If
you don't want to touch this one without
Yeah.
getting a legal opinion. This is not going to be very much money. First of all, by the way, if you're confused about who a landlord-tenant attorney might be, they're actually pretty reasonable. So this is not like going to a law firm and putting up a big, trying to navigate that. Just look for your local apartment association or, your small owners groups, which they're everywhere, and start putting it out there. Say, I have a landlord-tenant question. I need this should be even perhaps no charge for just a short conversation. And they'll say, and then, just put that person on your team. So I do this all the time. There are a lot, we have 10,000 tenants. There are things that come up, and, the worst thing you could do is not have that person on your team. So go find them. Oftentimes they're inexpensive if you use them for evictions and other things.
Well, and also there's a lot of liability here for you as well, because you're liable for what happens in your unit. Also, there could be damages. There's a lot of things where you also don't want to brush it under the rug. Plus, the person, that is being abused might even appreciate the help. They might not. But either way, you have to kind of get involved because it is your property.
Yep.
All right. Nancy is asking, what is a typical limit of people per room at a rental? Is it discrimination to not let a protected class rent there if there are more people than that?
So there's multiple things in this question. So first of all, there's no typical. There's occupancy requirements, and they're different. So, for example, you sometimes you have to, if you're stipulating these, they have to be consistent from state to state, city to city, county to county, whatever they are. So you can't vary from person to person. So that's number one. If you do have an occupancy standard, then you can't vary from the next tenant, whoever they are. It doesn't really matter what race or or gender or anything like that. So you have to have it. So let's say it's 2 per bedroom, as an example. Now you would say, why would I do 2 per bedroom? Well, what if you're next to a university and you've got 2 bedroom, 2 bath, and you've got 4 college kids? Would you do that? Would you not do that? So you have to come up with an occupancy standard, and then not vary from it. And what was the next part of that? It was something to do with.
Well, I think she was just worried that if she, denies somebody because there's too many people. So a lot of times, like cities have occupancy limits too.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just follow that. Just, you just use the government's own logic and then stick with that.
But you are allowed to tell somebody, you kind of have to tell somebody, like, if it's 2 to a bedroom and you have 3 to a bedroom, you can get in trouble for that. So yeah, you're allowed to tell people they can't do that
if you have occupancy standards.
Yeah.
So and I don't. Hopefully, you're not running your own criminal credit background checks, and so all of this is part of that. So you want all that wrapped up into So they fill out an application. You send it off to a third party, just like a mortgage company would do. And then you get a recommendation. So all that stuff needs to be baked into it, So the protected class stuff too, obviously. So I think, these are laws that are set in place, and they're not bendable. You know what I mean? They're super rigid.
Yep, and they're for safety. So we've got a couple questions from YouTube I want to get to. Chad said, what is the typical cost of a property manager should charge for an owner for a lease renewal? Probably depends on what you're renting out.
Yeah, it depends on your agreement, obviously, but this is something that you got to shop out. So I know, like, I've seen as high as a month's rent, which is way too high. Just for a rental. But you can negotiate this stuff up front. Some of my property managers, it's usually a percentage of the rent, but all negotiable, man. Like, I think a renewal is a layup for most people. And, finding a tenant is obviously worth more than a renewal. And so I think that the renewal should be significantly smaller because there's not a tremendous amount of work there. However, if they're managing it well, then maybe you want to pay them a little bit more, because if the tenant has a great experience, but if there's all kinds of maintenance problems and all that kind of stuff, and there's all these other issues, then you got a challenge on the renewals. So renewals are important. We have a whole program for resident retention. So just as it's also something that you could do yourself, in my opinion. So like Danille does this, like you go, 90 days before? Mm-hmm. So let me just follow the logic
60
here.
days before, but yeah.
60 days. So let's say somebody's moving out the end of October. Well, they've already let Danille know. So now she has 60 days, to obviously figure out the condition of the apartment, all that stuff, and turn that. If you're not communicating with them and building rapport and taking care of their maintenance things and all that stuff in, let's say, the 10 months prior to that, the chance of a renewal is lower. So, like everything, this is also a relationship business. And if the property manager is doing a good job handling that, then they should be remunerated. But in my opinion, if it's yours, if you're just weighing in with them every once in a while, like Danille does, she has a property manager, but then she's also weighing in with them on all kinds of life stuff, and she just building relationships. I think that can't be understated. It's true.
Yeah. And, I like to give them that 60-day notice because I want to put their mind at ease, because they're concerned what their rent's going to do, and they need to know if they need to start looking or not. And I want to know if they're going to start looking because I need to rent it out. And, it's usually pretty smooth when it comes to all of that.
It's a fork in the road for them. Many times they don't want to move. They want to know what their rents are going to be. So 60 days before, there's a conversation. Mm-hmm. And I would recommend even more than that. This is not that hard. If you got somebody that's paying you, let's say $1,000 a month, it's a $12,000 client. Mm-hmm. If it's a 12-month lease. So at month 8 or 9, is it that hard to reach out and say, is everything okay? You can mitigate. This resident retention thing is a big deal. So my suggestion is that you have somebody help you find somebody, but then just deal with the renewals yourself. Unless it's a small fee, maybe 10%.
Yeah,
at the most.
Deborah from YouTube says, what do you do when a tenant gives you a fake letter from a bank stating that their deposit from their employer check bounced, and that's why they haven't gotten you the rent money yet?
Well, that's just fraud is all. So, I don't know. You just got to call them out on it if you for sure know it's fake.
Well, here's the thing is I wouldn't even call them out on it. Who gives a crap? That's not my problem. Like, you still owe me rent money.
Yeah.
Talk to your employer.
It is.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like, it's a good point. I probably skipped right over that. It doesn't matter. We should have a whole show on tenant reasons that they don't pay.
Well, here's the thing, Deborah, is that for one, if a tenant hasn't paid you in Arizona, it's 5 days. You need to look at it for your state. You're posting that notice on their door, right? Because you're not going to mess around. And then if they pay you, on the 8th or 9th or 10th or whatever, it's all good. But, don't let it delay on your eviction process just because they're trying to push it down the road.
That's a good point. So here's the way it should work. Rent's due on the 1st, late after the 5th, let's say. I don't know what your lease says, but let's just say that's that. If it's not paid by 5 o'clock on the 5th, every single tenant in my company gets a notice to vacate. We put them on notice saying you haven't paid your rent. So the clock is ticking. We don't accept letters and all that stuff. It's just your business. It's no different than if they didn't pay their car payment. So, it's a contract. And so then it moves forward and the pressure just still stays on them to pay. And when they pay, they've got the late fees and all the other stuff. That's all there is. They can go out and find the money from somewhere else, and when their check comes in, they can pay the other person. But you're running a business, so that's how we do it. And we move down the process. We don't delay process for letters, fake or even real.
Yeah, it doesn't change the process. And I've even had tenants, I've had tenants that pay me on the 8th and 9th because they're in some kind of bind. And I just tell them, you know what? That's fine. Just so you know, I'm putting the notice of vacancy on your door on the 5th because that's my process. But that's fine if you pay me on the 8th and 9th and these are the late fees. So I'm not if they're giving me a date, that's totally good. I just have my own date for my own things, and I'm super friendly about it. I get it. You can't pay me till the 9th. The late fees. I have to do this, though, just so you know. It's part of our management company, what we do.
You got to hand it for her creativity, though. She gets an A for that.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Well, the thing is, you can't, there's always an excuse, right? It's always in between. And sometimes it's legit, too. In between jobs, I got a DUI and I had a bunch of fees. I've gotten my bank check, my bank account, there's something wrong with it. I've gotten all the gamut, and it's all fine. And I don't need to call them out and say that I believe you or I don't believe you, because sometimes I believe the people, sometimes I haven't. It doesn't really matter to me. I just want to get paid.
What's the percentage?
That's fine.
What do you think the percentage of what would you guys say? I'd love to hear this in the comments. If a tenant's telling you something, what's the percentage of you think that it's accurate or not accurate? You know what I mean?
I say 50%.
You say 50?
50 for my tenants.
I think it's a lot less accurate. I think it's probably in the 30s.
Yeah.
25 or 30%. They're not, how many people actually come in? How many actually say, you know what? I blew all my money. I bought some cool stuff and I can't pay rent. Who's going to say that? Or maybe I've got some addiction problems or I lost my job. Most people are in such denial. They're not going to do that. They're going to blame you somehow. They're going to make you the problem. So, you just got to move forward with your system. Make sure you treat everyone the exact same.
But even if you do believe them and you do feel bad for them, because I have a closer relationship with my tenants than most people, just because I don't have that many, is that it's still a business and it's got to operate like a business, and all the things have to be run like a business.
Yeah.
Even if I believe you, I care for you, I feel bad for you, all of those things, but it's just still a business.
There's a personal component here, and I know a lot of people aren't going to like this discussion, but what would be the difference if your employer didn't pay you?
Right.
There's no difference. You're just upset at where you got to pay it. That's all. So, you got to think about that. What if an employer just stops paying you?
Because they're in a bind.
Because they're in a bind. Yeah. So what's the difference of you not paying rent? It's the same. So, it's you just categorize it differently. That's all, and you justify it differently. So, it's a tough conversation. But
well, I want to get to Corey's statement because I think it's good. He said, "We need to discuss the best way to handle a major downturn in the economy where your tenant gets laid off and rents start to decline. How long are you willing to keep your current tenant?"
So I love this question. Mm-hmm. I've been through this. This is the perfect second question to that question we just had, because at the end of the day, these people also are going through things. So I'm going to just tell you what happened during the pandemic, because I think that's probably the most recent. Everybody got sent home. Not everybody, but well, I guess they did. And, some worked, some didn't. Some lost their jobs, some didn't, all that kind of stuff. I broke them into 3 buckets. We have 10,000 tenants, okay? The 3 buckets were, some people just paid. They just paid their rent. You know what? I just knew I needed a place to stay. I'm just going to pay our rent. So let's call that bucket 1. I would say that was probably 60% of the 10,000 people. Then it leaves us with 40%. Bucket 2 were the people that came in and said, I lost my job. And I'm going to have a tough time. And those are the people I love, because we sat down and we said, okay, let's figure this out. Last thing we want to do is boot you out on the street. You've been a good tenant. Thank you for being honest. Number 1, transparent. Number 2, and sitting down and figuring it out. Because we do not want to evict people at all, period. Okay. Then there's bucket 3, and I would call that probably 5% or less. They just went dark. They don't respond to letters. They don't respond to knocks on the doors. They skip out in the middle of the night. Those people are going to do their thing. It is what it is. So I think that there's a big lessons, and so we've created a whole campaign in our company around, let us know what we can do to help you. We created a whole rent relief fund, actually, that they have to fill out an application, and we actually were funding people that couldn't afford their rent, that lived in our places, but there's a vetting process. You got to make sure that they're telling the truth. There has to be some due diligence around it. So, that's what a responsible landlord can be, but it starts with the tenant, putting their cards on the table.
But even for like a smaller landlord, I've had, tenants lose their job, right? And when a tenant loses their job and they tell me, I have the conversation of, do you want to end your lease with no fees? Do you just want to end your lease?
That's right. You did that, actually.
Yeah. In 30 days, and then I can get somebody else in here. And, the girl went and moved back home with her family, right? And for her, it was a relief because she didn't know what to do.
Told the truth first.
And it was a relief for me because I don't want a tenant that's struggling to pay me rent. That's the last thing that I want.
We don't want to put that stress on people.
And the stress on yourself too. And so, and then the other things, you can do is, I've had tenants that have lost their jobs and got another job, and, rent, kind of prorate the next month's rent and kind of just work. What can you afford to pay this month? What can you afford to pay next month? Kind of thing. But the truth is that, people can work and pay rent if they want to, the biggest caveat to this is if they have some kind of medical issue, not really an economical issue, but McDonald's is hiring, Target's hiring, like you can go get a job to pay your rent if you want to pay your rent. Now, maybe in that first 2 weeks while you're getting the job and everything else, it's chaotic, but after that, you're going to be able to pay your rent. You can get a roommate, you can figure it out. But health stuff is a little bit different, and that's a little bit touchier. But, for the most part, if your tenant wants to pay you, they're going to pay you.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah. And as we see, we're going to see this in an economic downturn. We're going to see people losing their jobs. We're going to see people needing to end their lease early, or going to need somebody else to move in with them, or all these things. And as a landlord, you have to be understanding of that. Let them out of their lease. Let them, have somebody move into their place with them. Let them figure it out, right? But you have to be working with them, because it's definitely a stressful time for them as well. So, and then Chad said he had a tenant one time that told him 2 months in advance that a medical issue was going to cause them to not pay rent. We created a plan to catch up, and they followed through on their word.
Good for you, Chad. So. Yeah, that's actually a great relationship right there.
Mm-hmm.
But it starts with the tenant, but also going back to some of the stuff we talked about earlier, it also starts with knowing that they have a way to communicate. We have in our company, we have a full-time person of customer service here in our corporate office. Her entire job, is to listen to tenants. because they have problems that move in, they have problems that move out, they have problems with rent, they have all that kind of stuff. And the job of a management company is to solve those things for those people. So, that's what they're for. But you can do it too. And, we can't do it if they're lying and putting fake letters out like the woman was talking about earlier, or don't even address it.
Right. And sometimes it's on you to pry. I always pry. Like they're late. It's
she does, by the way.
What's up?
No, she does pry. I'm gonna vouch for that.
I want to know because I don't want them to not tell me and then scramble, and then I have an issue the next month that now can't be solved. So I like to pry. Why is your rent late? What do you, and they usually, I lost my job. I'm in between jobs. I got a DUI, all these things, they come out, right? But that allows me to work with them, but they usually don't offer up that information unless I ask. And of course they can tell me, mind your own business, whatever, but they never have. They've always told me what's happening, and then we work through it.
Her nickname's the Crowbar.
All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in today on that note, and we will see you next Monday. Check out the webinar Wednesday and the happy hour tonight.
Yeah.